Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best knives and gear. There's a whole bunch of different categories, including some of my own personal recommendations. There's something down here for everybody, so make sure you take a look. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a battle video to share with you guys. It's going to kind of be a battle discussion. I've wanted to do this for a while, and that's going to be the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight versus the standard Spyderco Para 3 in G10. Now, the one that I've got here is in gray G10. It's the maximum version. You're just going to have to pretend with me that it is the S30V and standard gray G10 version. Why? Because it's exactly the same in terms of weight. The only difference is the steel that it's made out of and the G10 that it's made out of. So, for argument's sake, we're just going to pretend that it's the S30V version. So this knife has had a lot. I am hardly the first person to do this. I've just wanted to weigh in on it because initially I was underwhelmed by the Para 3 in general. Very underwhelmed just because I was like, okay, what? So it's a smaller PM2, right? And then in hand I was like, wow, you know, it's actually pretty great. And then I turned it over and I was like, oh, but the position of that stock pocket clip, my God. You know, everybody's been through that, right? And so after people started figuring out, okay, well, we can get these cool aftermarket clips for them, or I'm just going to choke down the whole pocket clip thing. The Para 3 in practice is actually a great size. It's a great weight. It's got a nice functional blade shape, right? It's got some great ratios. And so then I think Spyderco takes the, they take the criticisms from, you know, their audience. They take suggestions, you know, because everybody knows, you know, given all of Spyderco's flagship models, including the Spyderco PM2, the Manix 2, and a bunch of others, they make lightweight versions of them in FRN, which, despite me being biased against, I'll let you guys know before you watch this battle video, I do not like FRN. Why? I don't like how it feels. I don't like that it feels cheap. Very aware of how strong it is. In fact, I did a demonstration video on my channel here where I physically broke both G10 and FRN with my hands and concluded, wow, yeah, actually, you know, as scientific as that was, concluded, yeah, you know, FRN is pretty strong. I still don't like how it feels. But they wanted to make sure that they were creating a knife that was gaining the benefits of a lighter weight construction while maintaining as much strength as possible. So they did, you know, as you saw in the review, there were a lot of things that they did with this knife that just made it, you know, more durable and more substantial, I think, than people expected it to be. And it honestly was a very pleasant surprise to me. So I like the Para 3 lightweight more than I thought I would. But how does it honestly stack up versus the standard G10 one? Because the standard G10 version is a little bit heavier, but comes with arguably some better materials, especially in the blade, right? You might weigh in favor of G10 over FRN. So what do I actually think? You know, considering that that version, the G10 and S30V version, costs sometimes as much as 50% more than the FRN version. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to do it in my old battle form. I'm just going to kind of talk about it. Let's go ahead and get some measurements here. I mean, both knives are going to measure up exactly the same. So we'll just do the measurements once here. If I can find my tape measure, there it is. Both knives are coming in at 7¼ inches overall, and both knives have a blade length of about 3, it's just shy. I mean, like, don't count on it because it's right on the line, but it looks like 2.9 to 3 inches. And then your actual cutting edge is coming in something like about 2.6. I don't know why I'm measuring both, but I just am. 2. Oh, I'm sorry, 2. Yeah, it's like 2.65, something like that. So the ratios here, you know, to compensate for this choil, which I'm in favor of, by the way. I like having more room on the handle so I can choke up on it. Not everybody likes that, but if you're a fan of the Para 3 and you're watching this video, you're likely in favor of it. I don't know why you would be watching it if you just hated the Para 3 all the way around, but okay, whatever. So there you go. So there's your measurements there. Let's talk about weight, because that is a huge one, right? The blade and blade thickness between these two is exactly the same. The finish on the blades is a little bit different. There's a multitude of different finishes the Spyderco Para 3 could come with depending on what version you purchase. So let's go ahead and get the scale out here. Make sure we're zeroed out, which is probably going to take a sec. So here's the G10 version, right? The only difference between mine and the standard G10 version is that I have removed the standard pocket clip, which weighs nothing, for a titanium deep carry MXG clip that also weighs nothing. So the weight's coming in a completely reasonable 3.53 ounces. The Spyderco Para 3 lightweight, which is absolutely stock in this form. This is exactly what it comes in at. About an ounce lighter. Let me do that again. Yeah, over an ounce lighter. That's pretty substantial. I've always said that, 4 ounces is 4 ounces. And 4 ounces seems to be this universal mark with people. Whoops. Let's make sure we didn't measure that at the wrong. Let's do that again. It said negative 11 right there. Yeah, okay. It was right. But 4 ounces seems to be that mark with people where they're like, well, if it's more than 4 ounces, and this is generally speaking with the knife community, well, if it's more than 4 ounces, it's heavy. If it's less than 4 ounces, it's light. And that's okay to think like that. Some people go, well, I don't really care about that, but I like to go an ounce an inch, right? So if it's a 7-ounce knife, you better have a 7-inch blade. Or if it's a 3-ounce knife, it needs to have a 3-inch blade, right? Okay, that's fine too. For me, it's about carry profile. I have a preference in terms of weight and mass that makes me feel good. I like to carry things on the heavier side. I will make exceptions sometimes, like in the case of the Spyderco Para 3. I just love everything else so much that the fact that it weighs a little bit less than what I normally carry doesn't bother me at all. Most of the time, less weight doesn't bother me. It's usually excess weight, like most people, that bothers me. So I like to carry knives between 4.5 and 6.5 ounces that have a good, reasonable carry profile. What I mean by that is a knife that will go in and out of your pocket with ease, minimal hang-up, doesn't have weird things hanging off of it, catching stuff, right? That's what I want, is good profile. And these two are okay. They're a little bit awkward because of the hump, right? But they're okay. Now this knife weighs even less, considering it's, got let's call it 2.7 inches of cutting edge, and it weighs less than 2.7 ounces. So it's going to hit that lightweight mark for a lot of people. It's going to hit that ounce an inch mark for a lot of people, and it's definitely going to hit the carry profile mark for a lot of people. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now for those of you who don't want to watch a 15 to 20 minute video, however long this ends up being, because I like to talk a lot. By the way, just like you saw in the beginning of the video, I have the knife store. Both of these knives will be listed in the description and also in the actual store under recommended knives as well as Spyderco knives. So if you want to pick these up in any variants that I can find, they will be down there. But anyways, yeah, the ratios on this thing are unbelievable, right? I mean, this Spyderco Para 3 was very, very carefully designed. The Para 3 in general, the standard version, was very carefully designed. There was a little bit of a hang up on the position of the lanyard hole, right, and its relationship to the pocket clip position, which was not good. But other than that, they really, in a lot of people's opinion, they nailed it. So they took all that stuff. They didn't mess with anything. They were trying to make a lighter weight platform, but they wanted to correct some of the issues that people complain about in the standard Para 3, and at the same time not create additional issues when they transitioned from stainless steel on the inside and G10 to a completely linerless, other than the compression lock frame that was FRN, right? And this edition came with some additional reinforcement on the inside. You can see there's actually some additional thickness on the inside of the FRN handle, as well as some additional standoffs back here. And in my opinion, it was executed flawlessly, because while this does feel cheap just to the touch, it honestly is super rigid. It really feels solid. I can't deny that, right? So I'm working against a bias here because I just like G10 and stainless steel. I just do. I'll take the extra ounce, right? And this is, I mean, this might be one of the most difficult battles that I've done. But I do have a conclusion, I think, and I'm going to try and cater it towards what I think the majority of people need, in their EDC knife. So we've done weight and measurement. How's the action? Let's talk about that. So, if I were thinking of strictly a minimalist tool and trying to cater to everybody who's just like, I just want a thing that cuts, it doesn't need to be all, well, then truthfully, there's probably some knives outside of the Para 3 that I could recommend to you that cost substantially less that could end that argument immediately, right? So what I'm saying is that I'm coming at this from all angles, there's many different perspectives as I can. And something that's very prominent in today's knife world is fidget factor. Whether you agree with me or not, that's fine. I have a whole episode on that. And I just feel like 90% of us like to fidget, right? The reason a lot of us are even considering a Spyderco knife in the first place is because we've heard about how, you know, the legendary ease of manipulation of this thumb hole, especially on a design that accentuates it like the Para 3. What I mean by that is it's very easy to use the thumb hole in combination with the compression lock on this knife because of the positioning of everything. As you can see, I've become very familiar with this. Now, this knife has stainless steel liners, countersunk stainless steel liners that you can see on the inside right there. See, they're sunk into the G10. Those washers are actually riding on that stainless steel. This knife has, this knife and my Spyderco PM2 have the best, like, swingy sort of feeling. This knife doesn't have as long a blade or as heavy a blade, but I can still, it's very smooth, and it's pretty much free dropping when I let it go without having any blade play, right? And that's nice. It also feels solid, it feels durable, and I don't know if it's actually going to wear differently over time. But the reason that I'm telling you this is that this has good action. This is exactly what I expect from Spyderco. It's solid, it makes good use of it feels natural, you know, the compression lock feels natural, it feels smooth, it feels like what I paid for. This knife costs a little bit less. However, now, and I will point out this version of it has been used, but I've heard this report enough about this version that I'm going to repeat it here. It is not as smooth. I can do it, I can whip it shut, you know, but it doesn't feel as good. Like, anybody who just is like, I've never handled any Spydercos, and they go for this, then they got nothing to go on, right? But if you got these two knives laying side by side, 99.9% of people who pick one up after the other is going to go, okay, all right. Okay, this one definitely feels better. That's just what's going to be the case, right? People say, okay, well, you know, more or less friction doesn't necessarily mean, you know, everybody's not going to feel that way. Most people like to pull this right here and have it sort of drop. This does not want to do that, but that wouldn't be as big of a deal. In combination with that, I gotta admit, this has a little tiny bit of blade play. And I did try to fiddle with it a little bit. It's not my knife, so I did not crank on it, but I did you know, a lot of us like to slowly, here, I'll use this opportunity to plug my handy dandy Wea bit selector and Wea magnetic driver, two items that are incredibly inexpensive and definitely items that I recommend to everybody. You can find them down in my shop in my knife maintenance section. But anyways, I use those items to just make little micro turns in the pivot and just sort of see. And you can get this knife to, you know, to the point where it does not have blade play. But the action's way too stiff. And it's no longer, at least in the case of this knife, I was not able to keep it swinging like this, even with some assistance, right? Now, I can still deploy this knife. I can still close it, still do this. And it's important to remember that the blade play I'm experiencing is left and right blade play, not up and down. Up and down blade play is bad. That's lock rock, and it means that the lock is actually slipping against the face of the tang, which you do not want while you're using it. Side to side blade play, if it is slight, is not that big of a deal. If you find that the knife is not rubbing, which this knife isn't, it's a little bit off center, not rubbing, and there's minimal blade play, and there's no up and down blade play, truthfully, it's not that big of a deal. Does it bother me? Yeah, it definitely still does. If this knife were, you know, in the sub $50 mark, it wouldn't bother me as much, but given today's knife world standards, even with budget knives, it still bothers me a little bit. I'd be lying if I'd say I wouldn't try to mess with it to get that worked out. Now, I'm not saying that every single, you know, lightweight Para 3 out there is going to have minimal blade plate without any hope of getting it to the point where you still have the action that you desire and it not wiggling. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it seems like that's the general consensus out there, is that you're either going to have the action you want and a little bit of blade play, and it's still not going to be quite as good as the G10 version, or you're going to have no blade play and no action, but it'll still lock up and work as a knife just fine. So take that for what you will. Some people are going to put more stock into some of that than others. Some people, I mean, if you're like me, it's like, you know, I want the knife to deploy and I want to put it away easily. I want that fidget factor to be there. I want it to feel like what I paid for, and I want it to be centered, and I don't want it to have any blade play. In my experience, I've owned and handled, let's see, I've owned 3 different Para 3s now. On this channel, I've shown 6 or 7. All the G10 versions were roughly exactly the same, meaning they had no blade play. They were almost fall shut, if not completely fall shut when you push that little thing right there, kind of like this, what you're seeing there, a little bit of encouragement and wants to fall down. That's about what I'm experiencing with the G10 version. So that's enough for me to conclude that the action on this guy is just better. It feels better. This is still a good tool. You shouldn't be concerned with it if you plan to actually go out and use it, and you're not somebody who's going to put a lot of stock into fidget factor, but there you go. And we've kind of talked about this in terms of structural, like feeling of integrity in the frame. The G10 one is just a little bit heavier, and for whatever reason, I think I'm like a lot of people, I'm unable to convince myself that weight does not necessarily mean it's more durable, but I'm aware of it, and yet I still can't help but feel like, well, this one just feels a little more solid, right? That's what most of us say. It feels more solid. But the truth is that they are probably I'm going to say there's probably a marginal difference in terms of structural durability. If you do actually gain the benefit of there being steel on the inside of this housing, right, countersunk into the G10 liners, then there you go. This one's ever so slightly more durable. But if there is a benefit there, it's probably very marginal, because like I've said, this stuff is really, really tough. And I honestly can't imagine, that could start a dumpster fire argument that could go on forever. But the truth is whatever you'd be doing with your knife that would cause like critical damage to the frame of either of these knives, right? You probably would damage some other aspect of the knife well before that happened. You would probably damage the blade in a way that would make the knife unusable, or you'd be breaking the tip. You might warp the stop pin or something like that, or you might even warp the compression lock. It's hard to say. I'm not saying that the compression lock or the material the compression lock is made out of is less or more durable than FRN, but its positioning and where the pressure is going, you might find that you'd cause damage somewhere else outside of the FRN. So, given that, it's like, it kind of seems trivial, right? I'm gonna guess, my gut instinct says, all possible scenarios, all possible force that you could apply to either of these knives, right? Whether logical or illogical within the standards of what you would normally use a knife for, or outside of those standards, maybe the G10 and steel one is a little bit more durable. But what you'd have to do to prove it is just nonsense. It's so far beyond the realm of normalcy when it comes to a folding knife. I'm not even sure that I really even want to discuss, even though I've been discussing it for 5 minutes, which one's really more durable, right? Let's talk about the pocket clip. That's a huge one. The pocket clip on the lightweight is better, period. Because here's the problem. This one that I've purchased, and it's fairly expensive. It's great. I love this, but it doesn't come with its stock. This is the one that comes with its stock, and here's where it hangs, right here. So not only is it making room, it's emphasizing the lanyard hole above anything else, but look how much of this knife sticks out of your pocket. On top of that, the pocket clip's cleared on here, creates a hot spot. It's just not in a good position, right? So you automatically, in my opinion, if you buy a Spyderco Para 3 G10 version, you are automatically going to need to spend, you don't have to, but I would recommend spending some additional money and getting a clip that actually makes sense on it. On this version that already starts off as a less expensive knife, you have a clip that is just in a better position. And it's the wire clip, it's unassuming, it's unobtrusive, it's functional. And like the Spyderco Para 3, it is ambidextrous, even though the compression lock is a right-handed compression lock. Do they have a left-handed Para 3 now? I don't know. Maybe they do or maybe they don't. I can't really remember. The only difference is that the Spyderco Para 3 G10 actually has positions for tip up, tip down, right, or left-handed carry. I prefer tip up on all of my knives, but whatever tickles your fancy. On this guy, it's either left or right-handed tip up. That's okay. I imagine very few people will be bent out of shape about that. But the pocket clip is undeniably better on this one. That's just the case. Something else that I find undeniably better on the lightweight one is the feeling in hand is actually, it's nicer because the scales are less blocky. This is fine, but it has that blocky Spyderco G10 feel, whereas this one's got some nice rounding, some additional rounding, right? Where if you applied the same thing to this version, it would make it better, in my opinion. And you'd think like, well, how much, if this is good, like, do I really care about that? It honestly does feel really, really good in hand. It really does, so that's something that I find a little bit better. Something that I don't like as much about this one as I do this one is when you deconstruct this knife, you have to, this is a minor detail, right? You can take this apart and it's got T8 hardware, but you have to take the pocket clip off to completely take it apart. On this one, technically you can leave the pocket clip off, though this is something I got hung up on in the other one, and I had forgotten about this until just now. Something that actually makes this knife better in terms of disassembly is that you actually don't have the lanyard barrel to deal with during disassembly. So actually, I'm going to stop myself there and correct myself. This guy is going to be a much bigger problem to take completely apart than this guy. However, you don't necessarily have to take this knife completely apart to clean it. So here's how I'm going to conclude the disassembly thing. If you plan on customizing this knife, or I guess this one with aftermarket scales, this guy is going to be easier because you don't have to work around that lanyard barrel, which anybody who's tried to disassemble a Spyderco Manix 2, a PM2, or a Para 3, that lanyard barrel sucks, and it almost always gets completely annihilated during disassembly. So this guy's going to be better. In terms of cleaning the knife, it's going to be about the same, but the advantage to this guy is that you do not have to take the pocket clip off. This one does. And a lot of people say, well, you don't necessarily have to, take it completely apart to clean it out. I suppose, there's ways around that. It just depends on what it is that you're going to do between the two. I think that I have covered everything except the steel. So the standard steel that comes with the Spyderco Para 3 G10 is CPM S30V, a steel that was made specifically for folding knives. And to this day, while it doesn't have the shine and the glory, I did a meme about this the other day on Instagram, it doesn't have the shine and the glory that it used to have back in 2001 through about 2015, when it was just like, wow, S30V, it's still it's an amazing steel. It's still definitely a premium steel, and it's got excellent performance. CTS BD1, while I think it's a good steel, it's not quite as good, right? As good as S30V. We got two blades that are exactly the same in terms of geometry. So you're cutting performance between the two. S30V is going to outlast CTS BD1. I think CTS BD1 it tends to be a little bit less chippy. It's my understanding that the S30V and the CTS BD1 that's being applied to these knives is heat treated appropriately. So you're getting the right type of performance out of each one. But S30V is going to have better edge retention. It might be a little more chippy. So if you're going to be a little bit harder, you're going to be, kind of twisting it around, or you're going to, for whatever reason, be doing some impact cutting, the BD1 is probably going to be a little bit more forgiving, and it's going to be easier to sharpen. Both steels are stainless, though I got to be honest, I don't know which one's more stainless. I want to say that it's S30V, but I could be wrong about that. That being said, CTS BD1, I think, is still a pretty darn good steel, considering that you pay 50% less for this knife than you do this one. So that one's kind of up in the air. If they were both S30V, this would be a critical turning point for these knives, but they're not. Now, as soon as they start releasing special versions of this one, there'll be some sprint versions, right? Undoubtedly, it might even already be a thing. I don't know. I'm not as informed because I got a million knives running across my tables, and in my mind, I'm constantly having to do research and stuff for this channel. But is there an LC200N version of this knife already? People go crazy for that. I'm sure they'll do an M391. I'm sure they'll do, some other crazy stuff, right? Spyderco does that. And all the dealers will do their exclusives and things like that. If this knife had a steel like S30V, but it had the price that comes with this, the standard price that comes with this BDS one or CTS BD1 version, yeah, that'd be much harder. But to conclude, the truth is that me personally, I'm always going to be willing to pay a little bit more to get the version that makes me happy. And that version is the G10 version. Now, in this case, this is actually a Maximate version that costs way more than the ones we're talking about here, and it was a gift. This was a gift from my wife, right? So you might say, oh, well, you're super biased then. No, you can look back on my channel, and I've been saying that for a long time. I just don't like FRN. It doesn't make me as happy, right? However, if somebody just gave me this knife, or if it was within, a whole bunch of knives around the same price range, to choose from, would I be happy, with this choice? Absolutely. A lot of people's conclusion with the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight is that it's one of the very best EDC knives that has ever been made. And I think that's true, right? It's like I said, the downside to the G10 version is if you really want it to be, feel about as good and have that that low drag sort of in and out of the pocket. You don't have to mess with stuff. You're not worried about hot spots. If you want to make it that good, you're going to need to replace the pocket clip. Not everybody's going to have to do that, but that's something that people are going to think about, right? And you're going to notice it the very first time that you get this knife. So that is a problem. I think, honestly, though, to conclude for the vast majority of people, here's how I'm going to conclude this, because people hate it when I'm like, well, just choose the best one for you. You know, you guys hate it when I do that, right? So despite my bias, and I will list them again, I do not like FRN, and CTS BD1 is not a steel that I would choose over, you know, S30V, having the choice, right? Despite those, and despite me saying I'm always willing to pay more money to get the version that I want, I gotta say, I think for the vast majority of people, I think the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight is just better. I mean, it's really hard for me to say, well, no, there's X amount of factors that equivalent to exactly the additional cost, you know, of the Para 3 G10. There aren't enough, right? For my own personal preferences, yeah, okay, take my money, you know, but for the vast majority of people, I could not sit down and convince a room full of people, every single one of them, why it's absolutely better to spend this much more money on the G10 version, right? When this one is going to do virtually the exact same stuff. Yeah, it's not going to hold an edge longer, but it's going to be easier to sharpen, and that steel should roll before it chips, right? S30V is going to chip before this guy does. This guy's going to roll a little bit. It's going to be more likely to roll, as far as I understand BD1. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But yeah, I just can't, I can't just tell people it's not worth it. I wish that you could get these to a point where they don't have blade play, and they don't have to feel as good. I don't expect PB washers running on the FRN surface. Well, actually, wait, I think there's a little disc in there. I never really expected the action to feel exactly the same, right? It doesn't have to, but I wish you could get it to where there wasn't blade play. That's going to kill it for a lot of people. That aside, though, I still think it's a better overall value. Sometimes I have to look at this stuff and really think, like, you know, take my own bias and throw them aside and conclude, I think, you know, with the best intentions in mind, you know, for my viewers. Because, I mean, really what I strive to do here on this channel is make sure that I can give you guys all the information that you know, I possibly can, and help you make an informed decision. If you like this one and you're like me, or the way that I described my bias and my preferences sounds like you, then go with the G10 one, definitely. But if you're more of a function over form person, and you're trying to maximize the utility of the thing you're buying, right? And you don't have all these preferences for fidget factor or feeling of solidity or feeling of quality, you know, you just want the best tool that you can get for your money, but you're specifically looking in this realm, yeah, it's probably going to be that guy. Guys, I think that's going to be pretty much it for this battle. This was a lot of fun. Really happy that I got an opportunity to check out the Para 3. It'll be going back to its original owner here very soon. But yeah, I think that's going to be pretty much it. Like I said, check out the links in the description. Check out my Amazon store for these knives and many, many more, including knife maintenance items, EDC items in general. There's a whole bunch of stuff down there, and I constantly add more to the store every week. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody.